Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm finishing up the last of my action figure reviews of the latest Marvel Legends Spider-Man wave, and after the last two disappointing figures I thought I'd end on a strong one, which is Tombstone. Now this figure was a little bit delayed, it was the last one in this wave to actually finally materialise, but he's here now, so let's take a closer look. And if we start off by taking a look at the packaging, we can see of course that we have a return to the animated series packaging, or the old Toy Biz packaging from the 1990s. You all know my feelings on this, it's nostalgia heavy, I love it, I think the artwork is fantastic, the colorization is brilliant, and I really like this image we have of Tombstone there on the billboard. I think it looks really striking. This is so displayable, this looks really great on your wall if you put a peg on it. And then if we flip the packaging, we can see a slightly enlarged version of that same image on the back here, looking pretty cool, brandishing that crowbar, looking pretty menacing there, and we have some instructions on how to swap out the various bits and pieces, and a little bit of small text, a bit of blurb. Overall, this isn't particularly exciting, this isn't really the side to display, but it's perfectly functional, and as I said, it's nostalgia heavy, so it's quite nice. Now, if we take a look at the figure itself, I think the first thing to note is that this is really a comic book version of Tombstone. In fact, I think this look is taken directly from his late 80s, early 90s appearance from that suit, and it looks pretty cool. This is a version of Tombstone I'm really glad to have. If we compare him with the previous release, we can see that this was very much an early appearance in that sort of leather jumpsuit that he used to wear, which, you know, was a slightly disappointing release at the time. I remember being really excited to finally own Tombstone, and this one, it just kind of underwhelmed because the paint apps were minimal. It just looked a bit bland, really. So I'm really glad that we got this update. Now, it isn't really the animated series version of the character. As you can see here, this is a very different look. As it happens, I'm not overly struck on this design from the animated series, so I actually prefer the suited version that we're getting here, but as I say, it is a comic book version. Now, in terms of the sculpting, I have to say, I really like this head sculpt. I think it looks really, really good, and I really like this slightly menacing snarl that he's got on his face here. This looks pretty pretty menacing stuff, and we actually get an alternate head, which we'll see a little bit later, but putting them side by side, it's really nice that we actually see a lot of detailing here. I really like that each sculpt is unique and different to what we've had previously, and the paint apps are really nicely applied, particularly around the eyes, and I think they've done a really nice job in terms of the shading, giving it that sense of depth and texture. In terms of the body, there's not too much to say here. Of course, there is a plastic wraparound to create that suit effect. I'm not sure if we've seen this version before, because Tombstone is slightly bigger and broader than most other average 6-inch Marvel Legends figures. So it may not be exactly what we've seen before, but it's very similar to other releases that we've seen. Sadly, there's just not a lot going on when it comes to shading or washes or anything like that, so it just feels a bit plastic-like, which is a shame because it's not a bad sculpt. It looks really nice. It's nice that we have the tie there, and there's a little bit of detail there, and we can see the blue suit underneath, which is, you know, a nice touch, but again, just some shading would make all the difference. So let's take a look at the articulation. There is a ball joint at the base of the neck, and he does have a long neck, which is very helpful here. It will allow the head to move all the way around, and it will sort of wobble from side to side. It can lean forwards and backwards a little bit, but not a huge range of motion, which is a bit disappointing. He does have big chunky ball joints in the shoulders though, so the arms will lift up and out. There is a complementary bicep swivel, as you would hope, and there is a double joint at the elbow there, although because of the size of the arm, it tends to only bend to about 45 degrees. Pin swivel at the wrist, of course, and then we have, I think, a ball joint in the waist of this figure, but it's quite limited. He can move from side to side, and he can kind of wobble, leaning left and right, but he can't really bend forwards or backwards at all. Now, he does have ball joints in the hips. The legs will kick out to the side. There's a thigh swivel at the top there. The leg will kick forwards and it will come backwards a little bit, and there's a double joint at the knee there as well, so that lower leg will kick all the way back, which is great. Now, he does have this shoe joint, so it is an ankle pivot, but it's very, very limited. It will sort of rock from side to side, but it's not really going to hinge much in the way of forwards and backwards. Okay, so let's take a look at the accessories, and Tombstone fares a little bit better actually than the other figures in this wave. He comes with an additional pair of closed fists, his crowbar, and this alternate head, which I think is pretty magnificent. And with just a couple of accessories, you're actually able to create a number of different looks for this character. Now, the standout obviously is the alternate head. I really like this snarling head, and the detail there around the gums in particular I think is really, really good. This definitely captures the spirit of the character. He's very menacing, and this looks great. Having the crowbar, there's not really much going on in the way of paint apps, but it is a nice piece, and it's slightly unusual. We don't very often get crowbars with our action figures, so I think this works really quite well, and he has no problems gripping it. The only thing I would note is that the hand that he has here is very much a trigger finger, which makes me wonder whether maybe the original intention was to give him a gun of some sort, or maybe they simply just recycled another figure where they had a gripping trigger finger. Either way, it looks kind of weird with a crowbar, and it does make me wish we actually got a gun here. It's also worth flagging that his scaling is pretty accurate. He's actually slightly bigger than your standard 6-inch action figure, which is great. So he's just pushing 7 inches there. And as you can see, this contrasts quite nicely against your Spider-Man figures here. I've put him next to Scarlet Spider from this wave, and this looks pretty accurate to me and is pretty fun. So I really like having this height differential between them, and I think this works really well. But having said all that, I'm going to give this figure 3 stars. It's kind of a middle of the road figure for me. It's got some highs and some lows. I really like the heads, plural, but both head sculpts are really, really well done. They're both new, which is fantastic, and I think they really encapsulate the spirit of the character. This for me is a massive improvement over the previous release, and this feels much more authentic to what I think of as Tombstone. So I think they've done a really good job overall in terms of the presentation and how it looks, which is, the name of the game at the end of the day, and I think this is, quite nicely done. That being said, on the downside, he is a little bit limited in terms of articulation, which is always slightly disappointing, and I thought we'd have more with this scheme. And once again, there is a lack of paint apps here to really capitalise on what is a pretty decent sculpt, and it's a shame that they didn't see that through. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do consider giving the video a like. That kind of thing really does help the channel out, and it allows me to keep making more content. And if you're interested in seeing more content, remember to hit subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos coming soon.